A narrator explains that dragons, since humans managed to create them 100 years ago, have become part of daily life. They are classified by size and function as small, medium, or large. Even the smallest are still much bigger than humans. They are used for transportation, various jobs, and even in wars as elite cavalry troops, being present in many aspects of society. Medium dragons, the size of a house, are mainly used for transport. Large dragons form the core of armies and usually have proper names. People who command these dragons are called dragon riders, who gather in specialized guilds known as the Dragon Riders Guilds. Sirill watches a dragon named Vritra, noting that besides flying, they are loyal, tough, and used to carry loads over long distances. A child gets excited seeing the dragon and shows it to her mother. It is also explained that dragons like the Nidhogg's, medium-sized and very aggressive, are used to carry troops and are valuable in the army. A boy excitedly says he wants to become a dragon rider in the future, not just because riding a dragon is amazing, but also because it's the most popular and best-paid job. Meanwhile, Sirill watches from afar, and a woman draws her son's attention to something she sees on the street. Sirill sees a man leading a small dragon called Tarask, used for transportation. These dragons move smoothly without shaking, making them ideal for carrying people. This kind of service is a common business in the city, transporting passengers and goods comfortably. Sirill notices something strange and asks what's happening, while the man guiding the dragon is surprised by the animal's behavior. The dragon growls, drawing the group's attention. Sirill then approaches politely to investigate, leaving the handler confused and curious. Sirill says he's not a customer, but observes the dragon and soon identifies the problem. It has an injury on its right hind paw. The man responsible for the dragon is surprised to hear this, having not noticed the wound before that was causing the strange behavior. The man orders the dragon to take a few steps and confirms the problem when he sees it limp. Worried, he complains this is bad for business and wonders when and where the animal got hurt. Meanwhile, Sirill watches silently, thinking about the situation. Sirill says the most important thing is to take good care of the dragon, refusing any interest in business similar to the man's, who thanks him relieved. Silently, Sirill looks closely at the animal, showing concern for its condition. Sirill says goodbye, telling them to take good care of the dragon, and the man thanks him. As he leaves, Sirill observes the animal and concludes it's not only injured but also depressed. Sirill asks the dragon to have a day of rest, explaining it's feeling down. The owner finds it curious, saying he never heard that dragons can get depressed too. Sirill insists it's true, even though it's a dragon, leaving the man thoughtful about what he heard. The man mocks Sirill, saying it's crazy to care about tools. Irritated, Sirill remembers that since childhood he has always been able to understand dragon language, even though he can't understand other animals. Because of this, he decided to become a dragon rider. Sirill explains that unlike people who tame dragons using signals, he talks directly to them and asks for favors. That's why he was recruited by the biggest dragon riders guild, Lindworm, which is rank S. He prides himself on being better than most at guiding dragons to do their job. Sirill explains that guilds are ranked by the number of dragons they own and the achievements reached, with rank S being the highest. Lindworm, where he was, is of that level, but Sirill feels uncomfortable because it's a guild that controls and enslaves dragons, which goes against how he treats these creatures. Sirill recalls being called useless and a rebel for nonsense, being expelled from the guild less than a month after joining. But deep down, he admits that being kicked out was exactly what he wanted and concludes, relieved, that this way it's all right. Now without the guild, Sirill says he still needs to work. He goes to the public office where independent requests for dragon riders are posted. Since he was fired, he decides to work freelance, looking for missions on his own. Sirill looks at the job boards in the public office, noticing most missions can be done with rented dragons and are open to all. Since he was fired and has no reputation with agencies, he knows he'll only get work there. So, carefully, he chooses one of the requests. Sirill picks a job to tame a newborn dragon. Soon he meets the contractor, Patrick Forget, who greets and thanks him for the help. Sirill introduces himself with a smile, ready to start the work. Sirill gets straight to the point and asks how they want him to tame the dragon. Patrick explains the dragon is a gift for his son, something different from just training or controlling. He says it's become trendy to have a dragon since the child's birth, as growing up together they form strong bonds, and the dragon can even become a bodyguard. Sirill understands and finds the idea reasonable. Patrick says he bought a dragon and hired several tamers, but the animal obeyed none of them, which is very unusual. So he decided to ask a dragon rider for help. Sirill understands and soon asks to see the dragon, being led by Patrick to the place. Sirill observes the dragon, a Tarrasque, which Patrick chose because it doesn't grow much and adapts easily to daily life, besides serving as a transport dragon. Patrick asks for help because the animal disobeyed the tamers. Sirill says he'll try to fix it and calmly approaches the dragon. Sirill introduces himself to the dragon and tries to talk, but the Tarrasque gets agitated, repeatedly shouting about its sister. Surprised, Sirill tries to calm it down and asks what happened, trying to understand the reason for so much distress. The dragon is surprised to realize Sirill understands what it says. In disbelief, it asks if Sirill can really hear it, and Sirill confirms with a smile. Seeing this, the dragon asks Sirill to listen, excited to finally have someone who understands its words. The dragon tells Sirill it was separated from its sister, who has always been with it since they were in the eggs. It begs to be allowed to stay with her, promising to obey anything if that happens. Sirill watches calmly and asks if it misses its sister that much, touched by their bond. Sirill asks the dragon if it would agree to take care of the merchant's son and obey as long as it could live with its sister. The dragon agrees excitedly, saying it would do anything to stay with her. Patrick then approaches and anxiously asks if Sirill managed to tame it, to which Sirill answers calmly yes. Sirill explains to Patrick that the dragon agreed to obey as long as it can stay with its sister. Patrick is surprised to hear about the sister, so Sirill suggests checking with the merchant if the other dragon from the same batch is still available, to solve the problem and ensure the animal keeps its word. Patrick is confused to hear that it was the dragon who said that, but ends up accepting. Sirill then asks him just to do as told. Meanwhile, the dragon waits in the field, anxious about what will happen next. The other dragon is finally brought, and the Tarrasque runs excited to see its sister, calling for her. Sirill, realizing the special moment, suggests giving them time and space to be together. Sirill asks everyone to step back and give space, and Patrick agrees, though he doesn't fully understand. The Tarrasque happily runs to its sister, relieved to see her safe, while Sirill watches satisfied at their reunion. The two dragons hug emotionally, relieved to be together again. One cries, saying it thought it would never see the other again, showing the strong bond they've had since forever. Sirill watches the reunion with a smile, finding the scene surprising. Meanwhile, the Tarrasque keeps calling for its sister repeatedly, happy to be together again. Patrick watches surprised and comments that the dragons seem human. Sirill replies with a smile, saying it's just because they're sisters. Soon after, Sirill shows a tired look, saying nothing, as if silently thinking about the whole situation. After seeing how the Tarrasque sisters act together, Patrick understands it's better to keep them united and goes to get the payment. Meanwhile, the two dragons thank Sirill excitedly for being reunited. Even though he doesn't understand all their words, he clearly feels their gratitude. Sirill asks the two to get along well with the merchant's son, and they promise to obey anything he says. The Tarrasque guarantees that as long as it can stay with its sister, it will do whatever is necessary. Sirill smiles, relieved by the understanding between them. Sirill says goodbye, wishing good luck, and lightly pats the dragons, who happily thank him. The merchant, relieved and smiling, thanks Sirill deeply for everything he did, while Sirill watches calmly, satisfied for having solved the situation. Patrick praises Sirill for achieving what other tamers couldn't, and is surprised how obedient the dragon became. Sirill asks him never to separate the two, explaining this is important not just now, but also when they grow up, as they could become dangerous if separated. Patrick understands and promises to keep this in mind. Sirill watches the two sister dragons sleeping together peacefully, then smiles, thinking that although he was expelled from the best guild, he can still do what he believes is right, and that's enough for him to move forward. Sirill reflects that he understands dragons' feelings because he understands their language. Even having been expelled from the best guild, he has no regrets. He will move forward, determined to keep working according to his principle, putting dragons first. Sirill returns to the job board, thinking he needs both to earn money and build a reputation for the future. He watches other adventurers checking missions, but notices some well-paid jobs require costs for renting dragons on their own, making them give up. Sirill looks carefully, searching for something that fits him. Sirill watches the notice board until something catches his attention, the client's name on one of the requests. He smiles slightly, decided, and thinks he should accept that job, heading out to start another mission. A noblewoman continues writing many letters. Although the maid comments she's already written a lot. Irritated, the woman replies that this is how one socializes and thinks about the worst-case scenario if her work were ruined. She reflects that even with so many letters ready, it would take a long time for the dragon riders to deliver them all, showing how much she depends on this method to keep her contacts. The noblewoman sighs thoughtfully, looking out the window, and wonders if there isn't a truly reliable dragon rider out there. The board leaves the mystery about what request this young woman will make, connecting to Sirill's fate. Sirill arrives at an imposing mansion to meet his new client in person. Even expecting something grand, he is impressed seeing the size and luxury of the place up close, wondering who might be behind this mysterious request. Sirill thinks that even if it's just a letter delivery job, the pay is good, though it doesn't cover dragon costs, which would make it unfeasible for riders without their own dragon. So he understands it's not very profitable for most, but for him, who understands dragons uniquely, the situation is different. Sirill finally meets the client, who introduces herself as Catherine Morinier. She looks at him and says he seems very young, asking if he really knows how to deal with dragons and if he's sure he can complete the task. Sirill answers confidently yes. Catherine asks how well Sirill understands dragons, and he answers modestly, thinking his personality fits perfectly with her imposing appearance. Catherine ends up accepting, saying he's not the only one hired. When asked if the letter he must deliver is important, she confirms, showing the job might be more delicate than it seems. Catherine explains she wrote several copies of the same letter, fearing that if she sent only one, it wouldn't arrive in time. Sirill thinks the Morinier family, besides being counts and lords of that territory, is much richer than his previous client. So he takes the moment to ask a question, catching her attention. Sirill asks what kind of letter it is, explaining that this would help him work better. If it's urgent, he could deliver faster. If confidential, he would be careful not to let it fall into the wrong hands. Catherine is startled, thinking he's trying to spy, but Sirill immediately denies it. Catherine decides to reveal the content of the letter to Sirill, explaining with a slight smile that it is a reply to a love letter sent by Baron Bouquet. Sirill is surprised and simply watches, absorbing the unexpected situation. Sirill asks if Catherine has a relationship with the Baron, and she vaguely admits it, saying it's complicated to maintain ties with other clans. She informs him that the letter's destination is Rabaul, and Sirill mentally calculates the distance between the cities, thinking about the journey. Sirill assures Catherine that he will manage to deliver the letter in just one day, which surprises her since other messengers asked for 3 days. She accepts the deadline, saying all that matters is that he delivers it. Catherine hands the letter to Sirill and says she will leave the job in his hands. She asks him to bring a receipt of delivery before paying for the service. Sirill agrees without questioning and sets out to complete the mission. Sirill thinks this mission is more sophisticated than he expected. Since he doesn't have his own dragon, he plans to rent one. At the same time, he imagines this could help him build ties not only with the Morinier family, but also with the involved barony. Sirill decides he needs to do his best on this job. Soon after, he enters an office where he is greeted by an employee who welcomes him. Sirill explains to the employee that he needs a fast dragon and asks if wyverns are available. The man confirms they have 3 and asks Sirill to follow him, starting to guide him through the place. Sirill is taken to the place where the wyverns are kept and is allowed to choose one. He thanks and observes the animals. Meanwhile, it is narrated that each dragon rider has their own methods to communicate with these creatures, some kept secret. Sirill approaches the wyverns while the shop owner, used to this kind of interaction from managing a dragon rental house, watches calmly. Suddenly, the wyverns get agitated and start repeatedly announcing that he is arriving, catching everyone's attention. The wyverns start chatting among themselves, saying Sirill seems foolish compared to the last client. Sirill hears this and, with a smile, asks what they mean by stupid, making it clear he understands their language. Surprised, the wyverns realize the human understands them, something unusual for them. The wyverns are impressed to discover Sirill understands their language, saying this is rare. Curious, they ask if he was raised by a dragon, but he denies it. Although finding Sirill strange, the wyverns change the subject and want to know why he is there. Sirill explains to the wyverns that he needs a fast partner to deliver a letter as soon as possible. One wyvern boasts of being the fastest, but soon gets curious and asks what kind of letter it is. When Sirill awkwardly admits it's a love letter, everyone reacts surprised. The wyvern gets excited knowing the letter is from a woman to a man and immediately offers to deliver it, saying this is great and asking to be chosen. Sirill watches his enthusiasm surprised. The wyvern begs to hold the letter, clearly thrilled, but the other dragons call him a pervert and question what he sees so good in a human woman. Sirill feels awkward but admits he would be the fastest for this delivery. Sirill confirms with the dragon that he is really the fastest for this kind of delivery. Receiving a confident answer, he decides to choose the dragon on the right and proceeds to settle details with the attendant. Sirill declines the attendant's suggestion to pick the middle dragon, who would be the fastest, insisting on the one on the right. The attendant finds it a rare choice, but accepts when seeing Sirill's conviction. The dragon gets excited smelling the letter and recognizing the handwriting of a lady, begging to hold it. Sirill, unsure if it's right, ends up letting him. The dragon starts getting agitated, fascinated by the perfume and feminine writing, making Sirill a little scared by the exaggerated reaction. The dragon, clearly thrilled by the scent of the letter and the idea of romance, flies carrying Sirill at an impressive speed. Sirill notes that despite their small size, wyverns can fly, allowing the most direct route to Rabo. He chose this method precisely to arrive as fast as possible, and once he delivered the letter, the wyvern shot through the skies, showing its incredible speed. Sirill and the wyvern reached the destination in just half a day, delivering the letter quickly. The Baron, happy to receive Catherine's reply, shows enthusiasm. Meanwhile, the attendant comments that Sirill is a strange person and thinks it must have been complicated for Catherine. Sirill just thanks and asks not to be bothered. Sirill reports to Catherine that he completed the mission in half the promised time, as the wyvern returned with the response in only half a day. Catherine is amazed, showing great enthusiasm and surprise at the quick result. Catherine is surprised and praises Sirill for having returned so soon, calling him capable. Sirill responds humbly, saying he feels honored. When she asks his name, he introduces himself as Sirill LaRose, and Catherine repeats his name quietly, showing interest. Catherine smiles and says she will remember Sirill, promising to call him again if she needs anything. Sirill feels satisfied, thinking that job was a great success, then leaves the place. Sirill walks through the dragon market just to look around since he still can't buy one. He thinks having his own reliable dragon would make taking harder jobs easier and save the high cost of renting. He watches the place, curious if there's a good dragon available. Sirill is surprised to notice the dragon Balor is being sold for a price much lower than normal. Intrigued, he starts wondering why such an imposing dragon would be undervalued while watching the creature lying on the ground, apparently exhausted or asleep. Sirill goes to the dragon market and asks the seller why Balor is so cheap, since he saw posters outside advertising the price. He is surprised to realize the value is so low he could even pay with the salary he earned from his old group. Besides, the poster was so torn he even felt sorry for it. The seller explains the dragon is physically healthy and even above average for a Balor, with no apparent problems. Sirill then asks why the price is so low if the dragon is so good, and the seller begins to reveal the real reason. The seller explains Balor doesn't want to work, which makes him very different when he obeys or disobeys orders. He even says he wouldn't recommend the dragon, but Sirill decides to check anyway. The seller agrees and lets him take a look. Sirill approaches the place where Balor lies completely sprawled on the ground, showing no will. The seller just indicates he can feel free to observe the dragon however he wants. Sirill watches Balor with curiosity while the seller explains these creatures are mainly used for transport. Although not fast, they have broad backs and good endurance, besides being herbivores, which makes feeding easier. Sirill approaches, says hello kindly, and apologizes for disturbing the dragon, who stays quiet and uninterested. Sirill approaches Balor and tries to start a conversation, asking why he doesn't want to work and if he'd like to talk. Balor, with a discouraged expression, replies coldly that there's no point talking to a human, making clear his disinterest and disdain. Sirill tries to talk to Balor, telling him to feel free and explain what he feels. The dragon, surprised Sirill understands him, confirms his ability to communicate, becoming more alert. Sirill tries to understand what Balor feels and offers to help if he explains the problem. The dragon, somewhat suspicious, ends up admitting he just wants to sleep, surprising Sirill with the simplicity of the reason. The dragon explains he needs to sleep 12 hours a day to have energy, which surprises Sirill since most dragons only need 2 hours of sleep, and some can even work while sleeping. Sirill realizes each dragon has its peculiarities. He then makes a straightforward proposal, asking if the dragon would like to work for him, even sleeping 12 hours a day. The dragon thinks it's a lie, but Sirill assures him he's serious, explaining he could have chosen any other dragon but preferred to stay there. Sirill confirms he will let the dragon sleep as much as he needs, but asks him to work hard after resting well. The dragon seems relieved and agrees, and Sirill shows confidence, saying he believes in him. Sirill pays for the dragon without worrying, saying the performance will depend on the skill of the dragon rider. The seller warns he won't refund if something goes wrong. Afterward, Sirill walks through the city with the dragon. Sirill suggests giving the dragon a name, saying it would be more practical than calling him by a number. The dragon is surprised since he is used to being treated as just a number by humans, but Sirill insists, saying he understands his language and wouldn't call him that. The dragon is surprised and ends up accepting. Sirill suggests the name Louise for the dragon, who repeats the name quietly, seeming to digest the idea. Still, the dragon admits he just feels strange getting a name, not rejecting it, but showing he's not used to this kind of consideration. Sirill and the dragon arrive at his house. The dragon reflects that maybe getting a name isn't a bad thing, and Sirill comments that it's a good thing. When they arrive, Sirill shows the door and says this is his home, inviting the dragon inside. Sirill shows the place to the dragon, saying he can sleep wherever he wants, either in the house or in the garden. The place is big but empty, and Sirill admits awkwardly that he rented a spacious house just to fit a dragon, but that size is its only advantage. Sirill comments that the dragon really likes to sleep, and the dragon confirms he doesn't care about anything as long as he can rest. Since it's late and there is no more work for the day, Sirill asks if he will sleep now. The dragon then calls Sirill as if to say something important. Sirill assures the dragon there is no problem, telling him to go ahead without worries. The dragon, somewhat suspicious, confirms if Sirill is sure and calls him strange. Sirill just smiles and says he hears that often. The dragon then starts walking away, more relaxed. The dragon calls Sirill Mastar, trying to say master, and soon corrects himself to the right term. Sirill gets curious when the dragon says he will show him something he doesn't show anyone else. Intrigued, he asks what it is. The dragon opens his mouth in a roar or intense display, saying he will show Sirill his secret. Sirill looks visibly surprised at what he's about to see. The dragon surprises Sirill by shooting powerful light spears, leaving the young man impressed and exclaiming shocked. He asks how the dragon managed to do that, visibly impacted by the unexpected power display. Sirill is intrigued to hear the dragon discovered that power by chance. He comments he's seen about 100 Balors, but none had that strength, indicating the power isn't typical of the species. The only problem is just that something so unique may bring complications. The dragon confesses he gets exhausted after using that power, as it consumes a lot of energy, even without knowing where that force comes from. Sirill says he doesn't have to strain himself so much, but the dragon assures that if the master needs it, he will use the power anytime. Sirill thanks the dragon, who replies it was nothing. The next morning, Sirill says he will look for work for both of them, while the lazy dragon decides to keep sleeping. Sirill leaves the place, thinking Louise now understands he will let her rest peacefully. He comments it would be great to find a transport job since he has Louise to help. Suddenly, an acquaintance calls him. Rose, the receptionist, approaches Sirill and says she's been expecting him. She then asks if he has time, as she has a special request for him. Rose explains to Sirill that Lady Catherine has a good impression of him, which surprises him and makes him wonder why they chose him for this request. Rose tells Sirill that only a few freelancers could meet Lady Catherine's demanding standards, and that's why she trusts him for this mission. She then reveals the job. She wants Sirill to find a person. Rose explains that this mission isn't a common search, but something highly secret. When Sirill asks if this is really a job for a dragon rider, she answers yes, making clear the task's importance. Rose reveals to Sirill that the princess is missing, leaving him surprised and confused by the seriousness of the situation, repeating the word princess in a shocked tone. Sirill is stunned upon realizing it is the country's princess. Rose confirms, but explains she cannot reveal more details, making clear how confidential the mission is. Sirill asks about the job, and Rose mentions Mount Himyar, to the north from there. He understands that will probably be where he must carry out the mission. Rose explains to Sirill that the princess's entourage disappeared while crossing the mountain. Sirill confirms the disappearance was recent, the previous night, surprised by the gravity of the situation. Sirill hears Rose say the client wants to first understand the situation before causing alarm, as there may be other unknown factors. Then she asks what Sirill thinks about this, and he stays silent for a moment, considering the offer, before replying with a well, indicating he's thinking it over. Sirill decides to accept the job and sets off riding Louise. Along the way, Louise notices he's thoughtful and asks what happened. Sirill brushes it off, saying it's nothing, though clearly worried. Sirill travels on Louise, reflecting on the mission. He thinks that, although they only said the princess is missing, there's a chance she's already dead. Still, he feels pleased they trusted him, knowing his record will improve if successful, but also feels the weight of responsibility. Louise confirms they're heading to the indicated mountain, while Sirill decides there's no use worrying before the time. Sirill shows Louise a letter written by the princess and asks if she can track the scent. Louise says she's not exactly good at that, but still better than a human. She takes the paper to try, showing some willingness to help despite the limitation. Sirill is surprised by Louise's quickness in identifying the scent, but she explains the aroma is strong because of spices, maybe a perfume. She says the smell is so pungent it would be too strong for humans, but dragons have excellent noses. Then they start following the trail. Sirill thinks how difficult it would be to climb the mountain alone, while Louise moves easily carrying him. He praises her, saying she's amazing, but Louise downplays it, saying it's no big deal. They continue climbing together. Louise asks if they're already working and says she wants a reward if they find the missing person. Sirill agrees and asks what she wants. She replies she needs straw to make a comfortable bed. Louise gets excited imagining a pile of dry hay to sleep on and is very happy when Sirill says that's no problem. She cheers, flapping her wings, while Sirill confirms surprised that all she really wanted was straw to lie on. Sirill and Louise set off full of energy to make the mission succeed. She even shows happiness with a heart, while Sirill remembers someone from his past who criticized him for having empathy even for tools, making him thoughtful. Sirill is startled by something strange happening on the ground as they advance. Louise notices and warns it's coming from beneath them, leaving Sirill confused and alert to what might appear. Sirill and Louise stop at the cliff's edge and see below a carriage and some scattered people. Sirill thinks maybe a landslide happened, but soon realizes the group below may be connected to the princess's disappearance. Sirill and Louise descend the cliff without difficulty. When they get close to the carriage, they notice it's destroyed and surrounded by bodies. Sirill observes the scene, shocked by the terrible sight. Sirill inspects the place and confirms there are no survivors. He finds the coat of arms on the carriage, proving it's the princess's vehicle. Worried, he wonders if she's still safe. Sirill and Louise notice a magical barrier at the site. Not knowing what to do, Sirill asks Louise, who suggests breaking it. He quickly agrees and encourages her, and Louise prepares to use her power to destroy the barrier. Sirill watches satisfied as Louise uses her power to shatter the magical barrier into pieces, releasing a strong light. Relieved and excited, he thanks Louise for succeeding, and she replies with a subtle smile and a proud giggle, happy for the recognition. Sirill finds the princess lying inside the carriage, still breathing despite the state of the place. He checks for serious injuries and feels relieved seeing there's nothing major. Louise comments this was thanks to the barrier protecting her, assuring she's okay. The princess wakes up confused as Sirill calls her repeatedly, worried. Gradually, she opens her eyes and asks what happened, holding her head in pain. Realizing the situation, frightened, she screams loudly, still not fully understanding what occurred. The princess gets scared and demands to know who Sirill is and why he dared enter her carriage, clearly nervous and shrinking back. Sirill tries to calm her, saying he doesn't intend to hurt her and explains he's there to look for her. Hearing this, she's surprised and starts processing what he said, repeating the word "look for" confusedly. The princess finally understands what happened and is visibly shaken, asking if anyone else was saved besides her. Sirill notes how impressive it is that she manages to stay so calm in that situation, but admits it's unlikely there are other survivors. Sirill and the princess talk in front of the destroyed carriage. After hearing what happened, she asks if there are more survivors, but Sirill says it's unlikely. He praises her calmness, finding it admirable. Sirill asks Louise if she can carry both of them, promising to buy all the straw she wants as a reward. The princess, surprised, looks at the dragon and questions if that really is a dragon. Louise just comments, litter, reminding of the reward she wants. Sirill says they can count on him and Louise, who shows willingness to help. As they travel, he says he doesn't know if the princess feels well, but explains Balor's walk steadily and are comfortable to ride. The princess observes silently, seeming thoughtful. The princess, a bit shy, looks away when Sirill asks if she's okay. Then she confirms, her face slightly flushed, and changes the subject by asking if he is a dragon knight. Sirill simply answers yes, while Louise just watches the exchange. The princess curiously asks which guild Sirill works for, surprised someone so amazing isn't affiliated with any. Sirill replies he isn't part of any guild. She's impressed, finding that remarkable. Sirill thinks, a bit awkwardly, they just met for her to already say that about him. The princess notices from the way Louise looks at Sirill that she really loves him. She says she heard dragon knights loved by their dragons are the best. Then she wonders why someone like him would be just a freelancer. Sirill is a bit speechless, while Louise just says, really? Receptionist Rose is surprised and happy to see Sirill has already found what he was looking for. She looks at him clearly relieved, while the scene shows the city in the background, indicating they returned safely after everything that happened. The princess thanks Sirill deeply for saving her life and asks how she can repay him. Rose, nervous, tries to intervene to contact superiors, but Sirill just watches, curious about what the princess will offer as a reward. The princess gives Sirill a handkerchief with her family's coat of arms, saying he can bring it to her anytime if he needs anything. Sirill, who already received the official payment, is surprised by the gesture and listens attentively. The princess smiles and promises to help Sirill however she can as thanks. He and Louise feel happy, recognizing the rescue mission was a success. The protagonist receives payment after rescuing the princess, earning 1,000 reals. He is surprised by the amount and suggests to his companion they choose some rewards with the money. The protagonist's companion, a horned being, insists he buy sand for him, reminding it was a promise. The protagonist dodges, saying 1,000 reals is equivalent to a man's monthly salary, but the other doesn't understand and keeps asking, frustrating the protagonist. The protagonist tries to convince his companion to use the money for something better than sand, suggesting buying a real bed. The companion is surprised hearing something better than sand, and the protagonist decides it's better to show what he means himself. The protagonist decides to take his companion shopping and guides him to the city's stores. The partner gets excited and soon realizes those shops sell supplies specifically for dragons, surprised by the discovery. The protagonist comments there are toys and other items in the shops, but doubts his companion would be interested. Still, they decide to enter and check. The companion gets excited, and the protagonist calls him not to fall behind. As they enter the store, the protagonist is surprised by Louis, a dragon rider from his old guild, Lindworm. Louis recognizes him as Sirill and says he was surprised to learn he left when he returned from a mission. Sirill confirms, somewhat embarrassed. Louis says it was a shame Sirill left and offers to talk to the guild staff to have him accepted back. Sirill is surprised and asks if he'd really do that, but admits he actually doesn't want to go back. Still, Louis answers enthusiastically, saying of course. Louis says Sirill could return to the guild if he gave up prioritizing dragons above all else. He emphasizes Sirill is very skilled, and if he gave up that principle, they could start over as if nothing happened. Sirill understands the hint and responds with a subtle smile. Sirill declines Louis's offer, saying he won't give up his principle. Louis tries to convince him, saying nowadays you can't do anything without a guild, and he just wanted to help. Sirill stays firm while his companion just watches and calls him casually. Sirill's companion, confused, asks what they were talking about and reminds him they still need to buy the bed. Sirill apologizes and explains Louis basically wanted him to stop letting the dragon sleep 12 hours a day. The dragon is shocked hearing this, reacting scared. The dragon becomes furious and growls at Louis, who is startled and demands to know what Sirill did to him. Sirill, surprised, replies that he did nothing and asks if Louis saw him give any orders. Louis, nervous, asks Sirill to tell the dragon to stop immediately. Louis, irritated, asks what kind of magic trick Sirill uses to control the dragon since he has always been like this. Sirill replies that he did nothing and explains it's because he truly values and cares for them. Louise is confused by this sincere answer. Louise thinks Sirill's answer is silly and walks away, concluding they will never agree with each other. Sirill then smiles at his companion, promising that as long as he is with him, he will make sure the dragon keeps sleeping 12 hours a day. The dragon happily celebrates upon hearing this. Sirill and his companion enter the store and are greeted by a clerk, who quickly realizes they are there to buy something for the Balor. Sirill explains they are looking for a bed, and the clerk invites them to follow her to show the options. Sirill's companion is amazed upon entering the storage room, delighted to see the place full of beds and cushions. Excited, he runs and happily throws himself among the upholstery, playing and exploring the space. Sirill's companion gets so excited about the beds that he starts throwing himself on them repeatedly, fascinated. Sirill tries to hold him back and apologizes to the clerk, who assures it's no problem since those are just samples for testing, asking him not to worry. Sirill's companion is ecstatic lying on a different bed, saying it's wonderful. Sirill, curious, asks if that is a slime bed, and the clerk confirms, explaining that yes, that's exactly it. He feels relieved seeing his friend so satisfied. The slime bed, elastic like a real slime, makes whoever lies on it sink gently. Sirill's companion has so much fun that he starts shouting with joy, saying it's the best bed ever. Sirill watches, a bit awkward but happy to see him so joyful. Sirill's companion snuggles happily on the slime bed, saying it's much better than sand. Sirill smiles and asks if he really liked it. Upon confirming, Sirill asks the price, and the seller replies it costs 1,200 reals. Sirill just responds with an "I see," evaluating the situation. Sirill comments the bed's price is quite high, but asks if his friend really wants it. The companion excitedly confirms, but soon shows concern, thinking it's too expensive. Sirill, however, assures it's no problem, willing to pay for his comfort. Sirill says the important thing is that his friend likes the bed. The companion beams, thanks happily, and celebrates. Then Sirill confirms the purchase to the seller, who thanks him with a smile, while Sirill observes the place and comments that everything there really seems incredible. The saleswoman comments she has seen many dragon riders trying to talk to their partners, but Sirill is the only one who really manages to communicate with his. Sirill smiles and explains it's because he treats her like family. Upon leaving the store, the clerk says goodbye, asking them to come back anytime. Sirill smiles and comments it's good his companion found something he likes. They then walk together down the street, calm after the purchase. As they walk, Sirill carries the new bed and comments that it's quite heavy, asking if his companion is okay. The dragon suddenly stops, stays silent for a moment, then calls him, making Sirill ask, "What's wrong?" Sirill's companion stops and asks, somewhat insecure, if he's really sure about that. Sirill, confused, asks what happened. The dragon then comments that 1,200 reals is more than the money they had earned, though admits it's already late to question that. Sirill's companion becomes thoughtful, thinking maybe he was selfish wanting the bed so much. Sirill, smiling, reassures him that it's no problem since he had promised a reward. The dragon then laughs, relieved and happy with his friend's consideration. Sirill says his companion helped him a lot with the work and they still managed to earn good money, praising his effort. Smiling, he says he needs to reward him for all that. The dragon is surprised and touched by the words. Sirill's companion, emotional, thanks him with a big smile, affectionately calling him master. Days later, they appear again together, and the dragon comments happily that everything is great, showing they continue living well and happily. After finishing another job, Sirill praises that they did a good service. However, he notices Louise is strangely quiet and calls her, worried, asking what's wrong. Louise remains silent, seeming hesitant before answering. Louise finally says she's sleepy, leaving Sirill a bit surprised, but he soon understands and smiles. Sirill comments that the day's work took a bit longer and they still need to deliver the mission. They continue together through the city, with Louise carrying Sirill on her back. Sirill remembers promising not to overload Louise and asks if she can get home alone. Louise confirms, so Sirill tells her to go ahead and rest. Surprised, Louise asks if he's serious, and Sirill confirms with a smile, making her happy. Sirill thanks Louise for the day's work, and the companion replies somewhat tired. Sirill thinks there are no dangers in the city, so she should be fine going back alone. Still, he stops and reconsiders, showing some concern. Sirill becomes thoughtful and realizes his dragon can go back alone because they can communicate. Surprised by the thought, he reflects that it's rare. He can really ask a dragon to go on its own, something few could do. While the dragon goes alone, proud to be able to work without supervision, Sirill thinks to himself if he should buy another dragon, reflecting on the possibility while watching the city's movement. A cart transports a cage where there is a dragon-like creature watching the movement with a tired and sad look. Inside, a woman sits watching the situation, while the animal growls softly, showing discomfort or irritation. Sirill arrives at the market and is greeted by a clerk who recognizes him as the client who bought the velour. He responds with a simple greeting, confirming his presence at the place. Sirill thanks for the last time he was there, but the seller replies that he should be the one thanking for the purchase. Then, with a curious smile, he asks if the velour Sirill bought is doing well, leaving Sirill a bit surprised by the question. Sirill explains that the velour is fine and working hard, making clear he's not there to complain or ask for a refund. In fact, he says he came to buy another dragon but admits he spent a lot recently, so his budget is tight. The seller is happy and thanks him anyway. The seller informs that there is no other dragon as cheap as the velour Sirill bought before. Sirill understands, saying it makes sense, and comments he was just trying his luck, but apparently wasn't so lucky that day. Sirill says he's not in a hurry and asks to be notified if cheap dragons show up again. As he leaves, he drops something on the floor, and the seller calls his attention, saying he dropped an item. The item Sirill dropped draws much attention from the seller, who reacts astonished seeing it on the floor. Without understanding the reason for the surprise, Sirill asks if something is wrong and apologizes while picking up the item. The seller, amazed, asks if the crest on the dropped item belongs to the princess. Sirill calmly confirms, explaining he helped the princess on a job and received that as payment. The man is so surprised he almost loses composure, urgently calling Sirill. The seller, completely changing his attitude upon realizing Sirill's importance, offers to let him pay in installments, saying he can choose the method he prefers. Sirill understands what the man is thinking and smiles, realizing they share the same practical business view. Sirill understands the seller wants to keep a good relationship with him due to his ties with the princess, and so offers advantages. Taking advantage, Sirill decides to pay in installments, which satisfies and pleases the seller. They close the deal with a handshake. Sirill asks the seller if he has any mushkashu, a type of small dragon. The seller leads him around and explains these dragons have 4 stomachs, 3 of which don't digest food and can be used to store things, making them practical for transport. Sirill observes the mushkashu, capable of storing large amounts of food in its stomachs and expanding its body several times the normal size, like a balloon. He calmly introduces himself to the dragon, saying his name and greeting it, while the dragon seems to silently evaluate him. The dragon reacts irritated and mockingly realizing Sirill is trying to talk to him, calling him an idiot and complaining he's just another human trying to speak to a dragon. Sirill, however, keeps good humor and asks if they can just talk, leaving the dragon confused and speechless. Sirill surprises the dragon by understanding what he says. The dragon, who was about to say humans wouldn't understand even if he answered, stops midway and gets confused. He questions how Sirill manages to understand him, and Sirill explains naturally that he was born with this ability. Sirill tells the dragon he's thinking of buying him and asks what he thinks. The dragon reacts surprised, saying Sirill could do whatever he wanted without asking. Still, Sirill insists on knowing if he's okay with that, leaving the dragon visibly touched and thoughtful. Sirill kneels before the dragon and says he just wants to talk and have his company, not forcing anything without permission. The dragon, who had been irritated and calling men horrible creatures, is surprised by his attitude and asks why, hearing Sirill sincerely confess that he really wants him by his side. Sirill shyly says he wants to work with the dragon but admits the main reason is because he thinks he's cute and pretty. The dragon is completely speechless, blushing and indignant, not understanding what Sirill is saying, showing he's unsettled by the confession. At this point, the dragon looks seriously at Sirill and sets a condition to accept him as owner. He wants Sirill to give him a new name. He explains he was named before he was even born and reveals his old name, Colette, but asks Sirill not to call him that and to choose a new name for him. Sirill accepts without problem and says Colette is a good name. He then asks if she will come with him, and Colette, with a slight smile, agrees but makes clear she isn't interested in him. She's just doing the favor and will accompany him. Colette agrees to follow Sirill, but makes clear she only does it because he promised to call her by the name she values so much. Sirill understands how important that is to her and greets her respectfully, cementing the new bond between them. Sirill and Colette walk together through the city. Since it's still early, he suggests they stop somewhere before going home, the place where he plans for her to work. Colette reacts curiously upon learning it's a workplace. Sirill takes Colette to an area full of rocks and ores, showing her a shimmering blue ore. He asks her to help look for ores like that. Colette observes the stone, finding it very beautiful. Sirill explains to Colette that the place is called Mill Reef Mountain and contains an ore called Cabanium, very valuable for its many uses. He asks Colette to use her storage stomachs to keep the ore and then bring it back to the city. Colette understands the request and shows willingness to help. Sirill asks if Colette can do the job alone and if she'll be okay without him nearby. Confident, Colette says it's easy and guarantees she'll do it without problems, leaving Sirill surprised but relieved to have such efficient help. Sirill explains to Colette that besides collecting the ore, he wants her to carry the materials alone to the city and sell them to merchants. He asks if she can repeat this job without help, making clear what he expects from her. Colette is surprised and nervous, realizing she'll have to work completely alone, asking if Sirill won't at least watch her. He answers with a calm smile that he won't. She gets even more scared, fearing she might slack off and not do the job well. Sirill smiles confidently at Colette and says he trusts her, which confuses her enough to ask if he's an idiot for not wanting to supervise her. Still, he says she'll be fine without him, showing he really believes in her ability. Colette is a bit speechless, but ends up smiling softly and accepting, saying she will do the job. Later, she completes the task alone, surprising the merchant, but the deal ends without problems. Colette continued the work alone with ease, needing no help. The young man was satisfied to see she did so well, concluding his plan would succeed. After that, he returned home accompanied by her, now confident in the success of everything. Colette thinks the place is much better than the market, but the young man asks if she can sleep in the backyard since there's nothing there. Soon she notices another presence. Louise, who is lying down, wakes up curious to know who arrived. Louise wakes upon noticing another presence and asks who it is. The young man apologizes for waking her and introduces Colette, saying it was a sudden decision to bring her. Colette politely introduces herself to Louise. Louise tells Colette that she also moved recently and greets her. The young man watches them interact and thinks that now he will have 2 dragons living in the backyard. The backyard seems small for the 2 dragons, but they don't mind as long as they have a place to sleep. The young man finds it curious how much Louise likes to sleep and jokes that it's strange, but Louise just confirms that's true. The backyard is already small just to house the 2 dragons, which makes the protagonist think he won't be able to bring any more to live there. He concludes that soon he'll need to move to a bigger place. The protagonist takes Colette to the backyard where Louise has been sleeping all day, which makes Colette question that. Even so, the young man just laughs, saying that's Louise's way. Colette reacts with slight disdain but seems to get used to the situation while Louise remains sleepy. The protagonist explains to Colette that he promised Louise she could sleep 12 hours a day, which is why he accepted her. Colette finds it curious, saying it's similar to herself, who also didn't want a name. They conclude it was a kind of destined meeting, while the young man reflects that if Louise couldn't talk to dragons, he wouldn't have agreed to that prolonged sleep condition. Louise reacts, saying it's a pretty cheap destiny, while Colette laughs and agrees, keeping the mood light. They keep walking together until Louise suddenly stops, catching the young man's attention, who is confused and turns to see what happened. Louise gets embarrassed and tries to cover up, saying she wasn't looking at anything, shaking her head. The boy suspects and questions Colette, but Louise quickly denies, insisting she wasn't looking at anything, visibly embarrassed. Colette hurries to start the work and leaves excitedly, saying she's going, while the protagonist just awkwardly agrees. Louise watches and wishes him a good day, keeping the atmosphere light and peaceful. The protagonist watches curiously, wondering what Colette was looking at before. Following her gaze, he sees a stall full of sweets and thinks maybe that's it. Then he praises Louise for doing a good job, showing calm and satisfaction with the day. The protagonist, Sirill, arrives at a place and asks Louise to wait outside while he sorts something out. She agrees. He enters an establishment where he's warmly received by the attendant, who is happy to see him and greets him with a smile and respect, calling him Sirill-sama. Sirill asks the attendant if Colette, his dragon, had been there. The man confirms, showing a bag of coins she left. Sirill comments it's little but covers the first installment. He's pleased to realize Colette did well on the first day. The seller is impressed to know Colette is already collecting payments alone, praising Sirill for gaining her trust so quickly. He says Sirill isn't just an excellent dragon tamer, but also a man of great character. Sirill is a bit surprised by the compliment, but thanks him, embarrassed. Sirill explains to the seller that he's paying quickly because he wants to keep a good relationship with the store, as it's a good place that treats dragons better than most. The seller is surprised and pleased, since he usually has to insist to collect. Sirill also thanks for allowing installment payments. The seller comments that since Sirill bought 2 dragons from him, he wondered if the space therein isn't getting cramped. Sirill confirms and says he's surprised he noticed that. The seller then smiles and explains he takes good care of the dragons because they are precious to him. The seller explains to Sirill that in that city, there are only 2 types of places to keep dragons: small houses that fit 1 or 2, or huge properties that can house more than a dozen. He then says he knows a good house and offers to show it, but warns there's a catch. Sirill notices how well he understands the matter. The seller says the house is new and has a large space for dragons, but for some reason, they don't like the place. So only experienced dragon riders have tried living there. Curious, Sirill decides to accompany the seller to see the property. Sirill observes that the house looks very nice, but discovers no dragon wanted to enter there before, so the place stayed empty for a long time. This allows him to rent it at a very cheap price. Sirill decides he will live in that house and thinks that, since he understands dragons, maybe he'll find out why they avoid the place. Then he calls Colette and Louise to enter the big barn intended for dragons with him. They seem surprised but accept and follow him inside. Sirill tries to understand why the dragons avoid the place, finding the barn normal. But Colette and Louise clearly show discomfort, frowning and even trembling, and confess they don't like it there, not knowing why. Sirill notices he doesn't feel anything but perceives the dragons are bothered by the smell of the place, especially from the floor. They say the odor is strong and bad, enough for Louise to decide to leave immediately, saying it's too much for her to bear. Louise and Colette try to explain to Sirill what they feel. They say the smell is like a dragon was killed there, leaving something bad behind, a kind of terror sensation that makes the place very unpleasant. Sirill thinks about replacing the soil to improve the environment. He asks Colette to fetch good soil from outside and bring it stored in her stomach. Louise feels awkward, but Sirill says she can rest while Colette takes care of it. Sirill spends the whole day replacing the soil there with Colette's help, who brings the new earth. In the end, he is exhausted but satisfied to have finished the job after so much effort. Sirill asks the two how the place is after the soil replacement. Colette and Louise answer excitedly that it's great, that the effort was worth it, and the problem was indeed the old soil. Sirill is relieved and happy to see it worked. Sirill decides they will move permanently to that place, thanking the two for helping so much. The space is large and comfortable, and Louise is especially happy, saying she will sleep very well there. Sirill praises Colette, saying she did a great job, leaving the dragoness excited and happy. Soon after, he reveals he has a present for her, generating surprise and anticipation. Sirill reveals the gift to Colette, a large amount of cakes and breads he had made especially for her, as he noticed she was looking at them the previous day. Surprised and moved, Colette asks incredulously if all that is really for her. Colette gets shy, trying to deny she likes sweets and saying she would never be interested in them. Meanwhile, Louise finds it strange and teases her, saying that's what Colette likes. Colette nervously defends herself, but her tail wagging excitedly ends up revealing her true feelings. Sirill notices and realizes that even trying to deny it, she really wants to eat those sweets. Colette tries to hide her enthusiasm, saying that since they are a bit short on money, it would be a waste to leave the sweets there uneaten. Then, all excited and with shining eyes, she decides she will eat everything, pretending it's just out of responsibility. Sirill finishes a patrol without news and receives thanks from the place's manager. She then comments that he already has 2 dragons, which he confirms with a simple yes, staying discreet. Sirill receives praise from the woman for training 2 dragons so quickly and handling missions well. She asks if he plans to stay a freelancer forever. Sirill explains he doesn't plan to join any guild, so he'll probably remain a freelancer indefinitely. The woman begins explaining that she understands Sirill doesn't want to join a guild. She comments that many guilds, and even the dragon riders themselves, see dragons only as tools. While speaking, she prepares to reveal something more, indicating there's a bigger reason behind what she wants to say. The woman surprises Sirill by asking if he has thought about creating his own guild. He is shocked by the idea, clearly not expecting such a direct suggestion. She explains to Sirill that guilds are official associations recognized by governments and therefore receive many privileges, mainly in taxes, since riders and dragons are extremely important to the kingdom. Sirill becomes curious and thinks about the subject. Sirill is surprised to learn dragons even have taxes, but she explains there are fewer fees for them if they are registered in a guild. She also says that, depending on the guild's capabilities, dragon skills can improve a little, leaving Sirill even more amazed. Sirill gets curious and asks how that increase in dragon's abilities works. The woman explains that at the guild's highest level, the bonus reaches about 10%, but admits she doesn't know exactly how it happens. She only heard it has something to do with a contract between the supreme god Romaniger and the Dragon King. Sirill asks how he could create his own guild, and the woman explains he first needs a sponsor and then pay a deposit. She offers to be his sponsor but reveals the deposit is 10,000 reals, which shocks him as it's a very high amount. Sirill remembers that the previous day, Colette found a rare ore, so he shows a bag full of coins, surprising the woman, who realizes he already has the money needed for the guild deposit. Colette hands Sirill a strange stone, saying it changed color since the morning. Sirill becomes curious and decides to send it for evaluation the next day. The evaluator recognizes it as a rare, 4-color polylite, which surprises him because of the value. Sirill discovers the rare stone is worth exactly 10,000 reals, which the evaluator offers to buy immediately. Surprised, Sirill accepts and uses the money to start creating his guild, with the employee commenting how lucky he is. Sirill begins filling out the form to create his guild, writing down his data and the number of dragons. The attendant highlights that the guild's name is the most important part, making Sirill excited to finish the registration. Sirill hands in the form with the chosen guild name, Dragons First. The attendant reads it surprised but approves, saying the name reflects who he really is. She signs the document, completing the registration process. Sirill watches surprised as the ritual ends and a small fairy emerges from the glowing seal. He reacts confused, asking if it's a little girl, but the attendant explains it's a guild fairy, used as an official identification. Sirill understands and simply accepts. Sirill watches curiously as the small fairy begins to float around him. He asks what he should do with her, but the employee says the fairy will follow him alone. Then she hands Sirill a document and advises him to take good care of the fairy, leaving him a bit unsettled by the responsibility. Sirill observes the case with necklaces and anklets used to measure dragon's energy, which directly influences the level of his new guild. He remembers seeing dragons wearing those in Lindworm. The attendant calmly explains the importance of these items, but Sirill shows some concern, becoming thoughtful about it. Sirill admits he feels uncomfortable putting collars on his dragons, showing reluctance. The attendant understands and suggests he go to the Dragon Tool store, where he can find other types of accessories besides collars. Meanwhile, the two dragons get curious about the idea, repeating intrigued the word accessories. Sirill takes the dragons to the store for dragon tools and accessories, explaining that there's everything there: earrings, ribbons, and other decorations. He says he wants them to choose something they'd like to wear. While they think, Louise surprises Sirill by saying what she really wants is a sleeping bag, leaving him confused and surprised by the unexpected request. Sirill tries to suggest something, but Louise ends up saying she prefers a sleeping mask. Sirill is surprised by the simple request and offers to have a custom mask made for her, showing how much he cares about the dragon's well-being. Sirill asks what Colette would like to have. After hesitating a bit, Colette confesses, somewhat shy, that she wants a ribbon. This makes clear that, despite being a dragon, she has simple and cute desires, showing her delicate side. Sirill confirms he will buy a ribbon for Colette and asks what kind she wants. Colette responds with a shy smile that she would like something cute. Sirill thinks surprised that he didn't expect Colette to want something so feminine, but decides to go to the Dragon Tools store the next day and arrange it for her. Sirill takes Louise to the store to measure the size of the accessory. The attendant confirms she will make a ribbon of the right size. Sirill asks for 2, one is a spare, and she informs the price will be 100 reals and that they will be ready later. He thanks and agrees to the terms. Sirill puts temporary collars on Louise and Colette. Neither seems to mind, but still, Sirill feels a bit worried about it. He asks Louise if everything is okay, and she replies yes, reassuring him a little. Louise is surprised and moved to have received the eye mask, admitting she didn't even think it would be possible to ask for something like that. Sirill assures her there's no reason to refuse if that's what she wanted. Touched by the gesture, Louise sincerely thanks him, calling Sirill master and showing how happy it made her. Sirill is confused to see something start shining unexpectedly. He is startled and realizes the object emitting light is the guild card, holding it surprised while trying to understand what is happening. Sirill looks surprised at the guild card and realizes the level rose to 2 very quickly, which is not normal. The attendant is also surprised, explaining it would normally take at least a month for that to happen, since he registered a guild with only 2 dragons. Sirill concludes that if he had more members, leveling up would be even easier. Sirill asks if there's a problem, and the attendant checks the papers but finds no errors or signs of cheating. She explains that some people try to cheat the system by borrowing dragons to level up the guild and then getting rid of them. Sirill understands, realizing there are always those who look for shortcuts to make things easier. Sirill is happy to know his guild, Dragons First, reached level 2, receiving congratulations from the attendant. He asks what changes with that, and the employee gives him something to give to the guild fairy. The small fairy then starts drawing a magical map on the counter, making Sirill curious, while the attendant just tells him to keep watching. The guild fairy draws a magical map of Boisersel, which Sirill watches surprised. The attendant explains this map shows the location of dragons registered in his guild. Sirill notices a bright spot on the map, and she says it must be Louise, who is near the town hall. He finds that very convenient. Sirill asks where his other dragon is, and the attendant says Colette is in the Millleaf Mountains, probably out of the map's range. But then she shows that the map can be manipulated and zoomed in. Sirill is impressed when the map adjusts and shows the bright spot indicating where Colette is, saying it's a great feature. Sirill talks with the attendant about the guild level rising so fast, something they still don't fully understand. She says the higher the level, the more advanced things he can use, encouraging him to continue. Then Sirill goes back home and is greeted by Colette, who was waiting. He says he brought something for her, already expecting she'd be back. Sirill arrives with a bag and shows it to Colette, saying that besides Louise's accessory, he also found several types of ribbons for sale. Then he reveals a beautiful ribbon especially made for her, leaving the dragoness surprised and moved to see the gift. Sirill watches amused as Colette gets shy, finding the ribbon very cute. He says he thought it would suit her, and even awkwardly, Colette ends up accepting the gift. Then Sirill, satisfied, prepares to help put the ribbon on her. Sirill praises Colette, saying she looks cute with the ribbon, leaving the dragoness even more shy. She tries to hide her embarrassment, saying she already knew that, but it's clear how happy and flattered she is by the comment. Sirill sees the guild card glow again, even though the level hasn't risen. This leaves him confused, as he doesn't understand why the card keeps reacting. Meanwhile, Colette thanks shyly for the ribbon, keeping the mood light and a bit adorably awkward between them. Sirill watches Colette happy and affectionate, imagining maybe the dragon's affection for him makes the guild experience rise. He thinks that as the dragon likes the owner more, the guild level increases too, linking this to the card's unexpected glow.